and gentlemen, it is now that time. It is your favorite time. It is time for adults to talk about cool stuff. This is ATACS episode number 44. I'm your host, Paul from Atlanta, and joining me today are esteemed panelists, Mr. Ryan from New York City. Hello, Ryan. How are you?
Hello, gentlemen.
Is everything going okay up in the big city of New York?
Things are going pretty well. I think the city is winding down a bit for pre-Labor Day.
All right.
New York City holidays are kind of weird because you have holidays like Christmas where you have 1 million tourists in the city, and then you have holidays like Labor Day where everybody leaves.
Yeah, and for our international audience, next weekend is the big American holiday to celebrate the end of summer. I'll be doing that by going to the beach, which should be very exciting. And yeah, I don't know where everyone goes for Labor Day, but I feel like it's kind of the same way here, that just the city empties. So I don't know where everyone goes, but that's certainly odd. But anyway, also joining us, Mr. Flex from Raleigh. How are you, Flex?
I am good. Can I ask a question of another panel member? Is that allowed?
Only if I have introduced them first.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Give me about 15 seconds then.
Yeah, you go ahead and ask your question. Go ahead.
I have a question for Nate from Clayton, North Carolina.
That's me.
Oh, no, I have to change where you're from. I'm glad that you did that.
See, really my goal was to intercede Paul and do the intro myself.
Running host point.
When did you move? Anyway, go ahead.
In the spring. Hey, everybody.
We like co-op and team play on ATACS.
As our local Smash Bros. Expert,
Yes.
is Crom an Echo Fighter of an Echo Fighter?
Well, okay, so Echo Fighter is a term that is new to the series, although it basically has existed before in the term of just clone characters. They just made it an official thing that they gave their own name to. He seems like a mix of Roy, who in Smash Bros. Melee was kind of a clone of Marth, and Ike, who was introduced in Brawl. He kind of has moves from both of them.
Okay. So when they announced Crom, they called him an Echo Fighter.
Yes.
And they showed him standing next to Lucina.
Yeah, which he's definitely not an Echo Fighter of Lucina.
Okay. I didn't dig into any details, but my assumption was that was implying he was an Echo Fighter of Lucina.
No, yeah, I guess
think
that's
herself
confusing.
is an Echo Fighter of Marth.
Yeah, Lucina is an Echo Fighter of Marth. Crom is an Echo Fighter of Roy primarily, who was originally a clone of Marth, but is not really a clone of Marth anymore.
All right.
So it's just Echo Fighters all the way down is what I took out from that conversation.
Pretty
Among
much.
the Fire Emblem characters, yes.
So is Ultimate out?
No.
Is this what we're talking about?
Yes, we are talking about Smash Bros. Ultimate.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you were like...
I'm just trying to derail this podcast.
Yeah.
Well, you've
That's
been
a good way.
All right, guys.
Pretty successful.
Smash.
We're talking about Smash Bros. now.
All right, I'm done. I'm good. Thank you.
And so next up, we'll
King
be
K.
discussing...
Rule.
We'll be discussing what defines a Metroidvania.
We've had plenty of that discussion in our Discord chat. We can rehash it here. I don't want to raise Flex's blood pressure any more than it's already been raised.
Oh, I've already given up.
Yeah. So we already got Nate from Clayton, and last but not least, Mr. Will from Greenville, North Carolina. Hello, Will. How are you?
I'm lovely.
You're lovely. I know that you were incredibly entertained and just really keying in on that Smash Bros. Conversation. What's your take on Echo Fighters?
I don't know what that means.
Not exactly our Smash correspondent, but that's okay. So we're here. We're going to talk about video games, and I think that I'm going to talk about video games first. I haven't been playing anything. Except for I have been playing that No Man's Sky Next update, which came out a couple of weeks ago now, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I'm about 10 hours into it, and they have I know I've talked about it before because I played the game on release a little bit, and then I played it after they did a couple of content patches, and now I'm kind of picking it up again. If you've played No Man's Sky before and you have a save file and you want to get into Next, just start a new game. It really is as simple as that. They have changed a lot of the resource gathering, the way that works. They've actually made it a lot more streamlined. one of the big problems with the game on release is there's a, you have your ship that you kind of fly around in, and it took uranium to feed into your launch thrusters to have your ship take off.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of what that did is it kind of made it to where you didn't really want to use your ship to explore too much. You wanted to do a lot of it on foot because uranium was not easy to find when the game came out on release. One of the content patches made it a lot easier to find, so it wasn't as big of a deal. But now they've completely removed a lot of that sort of stuff from the game. You now craft what's called launch fuel, which comes from a very, very common element that you find pretty much everywhere. It's called dihydrogen, so it's H2 if you're a chemistry person. It really does change the game a lot from the sense of, since this is such a commonly available element, you can fly your ship to something that you think looks interesting or to a waypoint. You can land, and then you go do your thing on foot for 5 or 10 minutes. Then you get back in your ship and you just start flying again because you're not worried about, your fuel consumption as much as you did when the game first came out, which is, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually a really big change to the gameplay loop. Because you're a lot more in your ship, whereas before you were a lot more on foot. And it also changes a lot of like what your effective range when you're sort of trying to explore a planet is. So that's been a big change to the actual gameplay loop. And they've also done this thing where the tutorial section is about 8 hours long. It doesn't necessarily feel like a tutorial, but if you just kind of stick to the main quest and don't do a whole lot of side stuff, you end up finding, like, they give you a new ship, and then they actually give you a freighter and a fleet to command, and which is really cool. They've added some fleet dynamics there where you can send off your various ships in your fleet on assignments, and that's kind of like the mobile games, where you just like click a button and then 8 hours later something happens. It's kind of like that. Or Assassin's Creed Brotherhood had that same kind of thing where, you're sending off your assassins on these missions and they come back after 3 hours and you get loot and stuff like that. It's a system that's very similar to that. And the freighter is really cool because it gives you an incredible amount of storage space really early on. So a lot of the issues with the original game, they kind of take care of that in the first few hours of the tutorial section. So they've done a great job. I definitely recommend if you've had it before and you sort of bounced off of it, now's a good time to just kind of try it again and see what you think about it. Like I said, they've meaningfully changed the gameplay loop, and they have meaningfully changed the intro parts of the tutorial system to kind of give you more stuff, and that really does help to kind of guide you along and start getting you down the path of the main story. And then there's also side stories and side quests, and it doesn't feel as impenetrable, but it's still kind of impenetrable for some parts. Like I landed my ship at this outpost, and there was this thing called like a whispering egg. And I didn't know what that was, but it had a little mining symbol next to it. So I ran up to it and I started mining it. Well, then my screen flashes biological horror detected, which I've never seen that before. And then these like spawns that looked like a cross between like a Zergling and I don't even know. Will, what was that movie that we watched with Vin Diesel where he polished his eyes and he could see in the dark?
Pitch Black.
There you go.
Of Riddick.
Pitch Black. That was the first one. Do you remember those monsters there that had like the huge horns that go out of the side of their head?
Mm-hmm.
It kind of looked like those things, and they came out of the ground and they murdered me in like 5 seconds. And I'm like, okay, so what do I do with this? And then I tried it again and I got murdered again. So I just gave up and Googled it. Yeah, that's an infinite spawn. You can't really do anything against those. And those eggs are worth a lot, but there's like these advanced like kiting techniques for you to like kite those guys around. But like it doesn't tell you any of that. It just yells at you that there's a biological horror. It murders you, and then you respawn, and you're like, I've literally learned nothing other than to not touch those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's still some impenetrableness around that, but they definitely have done a much better job than what they did when that game first came out.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been playing it mostly co-op or?
So Steph and I started at co-op, and we did about 2.5 hours of co-opness, and then after that, she bounced off a little bit, and I've been playing solo since then. So I would say I have about 2.5 hours of co-op time and about another 8 hours of solo play time.
Okay, cool. And that system you were talking about, like the fleet management stuff, does that feel like big and slow, or is it just kind of like some nice little thing you do, like Tail Raider Safaris or whatever? Just fire it off and forget about it. Get some free loots on the side.
Yeah, it feels more like a fire and forget kind of thing. And I haven't gotten into it too much because you really only unlock that right around hour number 8. So I've only had it for a couple of in-game hours. And the way that they kind of want you to do that is your fleet starts out with your freighter and then some random ship. And the random ship that I got was a science ship. And you can call your fleet into whatever system that you're in, and the various ships do different things. So like I could jump to a different system, right? And then I could call my fleet there, and then I could go to my science ship and have it scan for anything interesting in the system. So that's why you want to have a science ship, is it helps you find cool stuff. But I could also send it out, like, just like go out and get some neat loot from somewhere. So it's kind of a dual purpose thing, which is why you don't want to have your fleet gone all the time, because you might jump into a system and it's full of pirates. Well, then you can summon your combat frigate basically to help you fight those things. So there is a little bit of like reason of why you don't want those ships out on missions all the time, but it does seem like more of like a, if you're just going to go and explore this planet for the next 4 hours, just have them all go off and do different things. But maybe you want them all there just in case you need that support if you're going to be jumping around and flying into different places.
Okay, cool. Kind of neat. That's a game that I don't know if I'll ever get around to it, but I was kind of sad to hear about how it fell short at launch, and then now it's, we talked about it before, just how much they've done make goods, and it sounds like they're still kind of putting out these big crazy content patches that people are really digging.
Yeah, this one feels more like an expansion, and I guess for the record, I mean, this is all free. You do not, like, if you buy the base game, it just comes with all of this. So if you look at what this game was hyped up to be and how disappointing that was, if this is the game that would have been the release game, it would have gotten a lot closer to living up to that original hype from 2 years ago.
What do you think at this point, like, the main thing you enjoy about the game is?
It really is the exploration aspect. The game doesn't have timers on it. It doesn't really have, like, you do have objectives, but the objectives, like, you don't feel like you have to go do them. Like, there's no I guess narrative pressure in any way, shape, or form to, like, go off and do something. One of the things I really don't like about exploration games is whenever there's this big, like, narrative reason why you shouldn't be exploring. Mass Effect 3 was kind of like this for me, where it's like, there are literally Reapers blowing up the planet, and you're really going to go look for dog tags. And it's like, yeah, I know the game says this is fine, but the narrative pressure is to run through this as quickly as possible because people are dying right now, and here's all their screams. No Man's Sky doesn't have that narrative pressure. It really is like, hey, you're a traveler, and here's some stuff that you should do, but none of it's time critical, so you don't feel like you have to rush through it. And there are a lot of different systems kind of put into this. So there's base building, there's you upgrading your ship that you fly around in, there's you upgrading your fleet. You can just pick an objective and go do it, and not really worry about the other objectives kind of suffering. So I guess it's just there's a lot of stuff there to do, but the game doesn't make you feel bad for doing it in whatever order that you want to do it at.
Gotcha.
But that's pretty much all that I really have to say about No Man's Sky. I'm going to keep on playing it and kind of see where that takes me. I don't know how long I'm going to sink time into it. Like I said, I'm 10 hours in now. I feel like I probably have another 10 to 15 hours in me. I am going to try and finish the main story path because apparently they have changed that quite a bit. So I should have a little bit more to report in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, so far so good. And like I'm saying, if you're thinking about getting back into this, don't even bother with your old save. Just jump in with a new one. Trust me, it's going to be a lot better that way. So, and I guess the only other thing that I've been doing, which isn't video game related, but it is cool stuff, is I'm going to plug real quick. I've been watching Dragon Ball Z Kai.
Nice.
Great.
I was never a kid that watched Dragon Ball Z growing up, so like I'd heard about it kind of on the periphery, but I was a little inspired to watch it after listening to a podcast a little bit that the Giant Bomb guys.
I was about to ask, was this inspired by Giant Bomb watching Dragon Ball Z Kai?
Yeah, so I listened to a couple of their podcasts, and I was like, I never got into Dragon Ball. But, this sounds ridiculous in a way that I think maybe I can appreciate a little bit more.
Oh, it is ridiculous.
Yeah, and part of the reason why I never got into Dragon Ball was because I'd heard there were these like vast stretches of the show where nothing was happening, and like that never appealed to me like before. But with this re-edit, with them editing out so much of the downtime filler stuff, I'm like, okay, well, I'm hearing these guys talk about it, and it sounds kind of fun. And Steph has watched it before, back when it was originally airing. So It's like, okay, well, we're going to pick this up and try and watch this. And I was pretty sold on it after I watched a giant green guy throw a 4-year-old into a mountain. That was pretty exciting.
So what's the difference? I'm still a little confused on this. Like, Kai is basically the same story as the original run of Dragon Ball Z. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's all footage from the original.
Yeah,
okay, that was my next question. It was, did they redo any of the animation and whatever? And if not, what's different?
No, so don't think of it like a remaster. Think of it as a re-edit. Like, it's the same series, it's the same story, it's the same footage, it's the same voice acting. It's just they had someone go through and do a lot of editing on the bits that were sort of like filler.
Okay.
So it's like the speed running the series kind of.
Instead of a character screaming and charging up for 7 episodes, it's only 1.5 episodes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Before they missed with that spirit bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like one of the very, very early things is Goku has to run down like the Million Mile Snake Way. And I just feel like that was probably 10 episodes in the original series, and it was only like 1.5 here. And granted, it was an episode and a half of him just like running down the Snake Way, but there weren't any scenes of him just running. Anytime that he was going down the Snake Way, it was because there was something that happened, like along the path. But I could definitely see them reusing like the same footage of him running and filling like 40 minutes of like screen time across 5 episodes, but thankfully they didn't do that.
Yeah, there was like a whole episode in the original where on that same section he falls off Snake Way, and there's this whole thing where he's like in hell basically, and they just cut that out completely. Yeah.
I didn't even know that happened. So I never watched the original, but yeah, I could totally see that kind of stuff.
So Nate and I are brothers, and Nate watched Dragon Ball Z when we were growing up. And that was totally my take on Dragon Ball Z. Was like, man, there's some cool stuff in here. All of it takes forever, and I am not dealing with that. I still absorbed most of what happened through Nate watching it, just like out of the corner of my eye. But that's a smart thing to do, is to edit out all that, like all the nothingness that happens for long stretches.
So how far in are you at this point?
Let's see. The last thing that... So, all right. So, I'm going to get these names wrong, but Raditz came down. That's Goku's brother, right?
Yeah.
He came down. So he's dead. Goku's dead.
Yeah.
Goku just came back to life, and Vegeta and Nappa are I think they just finished beating up everybody.
Okay.
And
Has
now
Goku gone in the time egg?
No, that is the hyperbolic time chamber, and he hasn't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
So Goku is running back down the Million Mile Snake Way to get back to the real world, because even though he's revived, apparently they don't. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So he's running back down the Snake Way to fight Vegeta and Nappa, and I'm pretty sure that that's where we left off.
Cool.
Everyone's beat up, but Goku's coming to save the day.
Listening to Paul do this, I really want just an entire ATACS episode devoted to Paul recapping the entire series once you finished it.
That would be great.
Well, we're watching about 5 episodes and in one sitting, which is like an hour and a half. So at the rate that I'm going, I'll probably be done with at least up through. Because there's this, and then they go somewhere and they fight a guy named Frieza, and then there's androids and Cell. I don't know what that is. I know about Cell, and then after Cell, so I guess maybe in like 2 or 3 weeks I'll probably be up to that. So I'd love to just take some notes and give you a quick rundown of how I interpreted Dragon Ball Z Kai.
Yeah.
So
I will say, unless you're just absolutely loving the show and want to watch more of it, stopping after the Cell saga is an okay move.
Okay. You don't like Boo?
That's where I fell off, and really, I mean, I think Frieza was kind of the
you could stop then too, and it would be totally fine.
Peak for me.
From what I absorbed, the Frieza stuff seemed like the coolest.
Yeah, the Frieza stuff's my favorite. A lot of people like the Cell stuff just as much, but that's personal preference, I think.
I mean, I am looking forward to several things that I have heard about, but I have not seen.
From what I remember, the Frieza saga had a good arc of Goku going through the struggles to power up and getting knocked down and finding his way back up and saving the day and all that. Like, it was a good classic hero story arc or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
And then after that was when they're just like, and the whole Super Saiyan thing was like still a mythical thing at that point. And they play into all that. And then after the Frieza saga, it's just constant escalation in a way that's really silly.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the Cell saga starts off with Trunks coming from I guess, spoilers obviously in case for
a 25-year-old series.
But you have Trunks kind of popping up out of a post-apocalyptic future, and then
there's time travel and alternate
androids,
timelines and androids.
I mean, there's some of that in the Frieza saga too.
Yeah, but I don't know. With the Cell saga, it literally opens up with it.
I'm just really looking forward to this one scene, which I have seen on YouTube, but I'm looking forward to the context of how a character that had never been introduced before shows up to fight Cell. His name is Mr. Satan, and he's a professional wrestler.
It's pretty good.
You've never seen this guy before, right? Like, he just shows up out of nowhere. His name is Mr. Satan. He's driving a car that says Satan on the front. He has a professional wrestling title belt on him, and he's going to go fight Cell. And I just need to know if that's as out of the blue as it seems, or if there's a scene there that I missed. But I'm really
and I guess did they recanonize that too? Because I think in the original translation they called him Hercule.
Yeah, I think in Kai he's called Mr. Satan.
Okay.
But Paul, so 2 people that I know, 2 brothers, were extremely into this series. And basically they would get really excited and start talking about Frieza and Goku and everything. And I would always bring up Hercule, just without fail. That was the only character that I liked in the show. And so I would watch a couple minutes of it with him, and I'm like, get all these losers off the screen, man. Where is Hercule?
Well, and I think in the video games, at least some of them, like the Dragon Ball Fighter, Hercule was actually a legitimate character. So watching him suplex Goku, and like win matches was just absolutely hilarious.
Yeah. So we'll see. Like I said, I haven't gotten too far into it, but I will. I will continue that. That's kind of our the thing that Steph and I are kind of doing right now. Because I don't play video games anymore. I just watch Dragon Ball Z apparently. So I'll just keep on doing that.
It's a
Look
good
at that
bad
beautiful
show.
mustache.
Oh, yeah, there he is in our Discord chat, which you can't see, listeners. There's a picture of Mr. Satan, a.k.a. Hercule, and he looks just like a professional wrestler. So
He's the king of trash talk.
That mouth. Look at that mouth.
it's 3/4 of his head, which is great. I love the anime proportions. All right, so we're gonna get off of anime. And,
There's our ATACS anime minute.
There's our ATACS anime minute. I'll be sure to report back in a couple of weeks. And Ryan, I think that you need to save us here from a little bit of the anime talk and get us back on track with video games. What you been playing up in New York City?
So, as a funny segue, actually, I did just finish watching Dragon Ball Super Season 1.
Nice.
Which is still fun. I enjoyed it. I think that's about where I'll leave that for now. Still fun, still ridiculous. I like the new villain too, so I would definitely recommend at least the first season.
Is that Broly?
No, it's Beerus.
Okay, I don't really know what Broly is. I just keep seeing the internet talk about him, so I guess I'll get there.
I will say I haven't seen any of Super, but it was really strange last school year when that show was wrapping up. I think they had their full series finale sometime during last school year, and my high school students were talking about it and like super excited about Dragon Ball Super, and that was very strange.
It's like weird, like time warp stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, the new villain's pretty cool. But anyway, so games. Yes, I have been playing games. Actually, I have a couple games to talk about. The first one is sort of a solo piece. I don't think any of you guys have played this one. I have been playing a PC game called Avernum: Escape from the Pit.
Avernum, okay.
Yeah, so this is kind of interesting. It's so I guess there's a little bit of a backstory here. I keep up with Kickstarters. I talk about them every now and then on ATACS, like board games or video games I've been backing. And I bumped into one called Queen's Wish, The Conqueror. And I looked at it and I was like, man, I really like the concept of this Kickstarter. But it has this and it's done by a company or a development team called Spiderweb Software. But it has this very old school aesthetic. Like it's not very graphically advanced. It's pretty basic. And at least. So I looked at the Kickstarter and it's like $20, and I was like, well, I was really on the fence. I was like, do I want to back this kind of old fashioned turn-based RPG? Turn-based, grid-based RPG at $20. I was like, I'm not so sure. But I went and looked at the company because they mentioned some of their other stuff, and they've done a couple other series, and I think one of their more popular series is called Avernum. So I picked up the first game on a Steam sale for a very very inexpensive price.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting this eye of the beholder kind of feeling from it, but in more like an isometric view. It really does look like a DOS game from that 640 by 480 era. Which seems pretty neat.
It is kind of neat. And they so these games it feels like they've kind of taken some of the old Might and Magic or NetHack. I was trying to think of a more direct analogy, but I don't know that I can easily think of one where you have those kind of old school RPG adventures. Like you said, this one is top down, grid based, and they have pretty cool concepts to them, and they've kind of polished them up a little bit. It feels like maybe they took some of those concepts and put them in a Windows 98 or a Windows XP, like they've brushed them up just a little bit, but they still kind of feel very, very like something you might find like from the 3.1 era or something like that, just old school. But yeah, so
Ultima, that's I was trying to remember what game series it reminded me of. It kind of has an aesthetic similar to Ultima to me, some of the early Ultima parts.
Yeah. Ultima is also a good analogy, probably one of the better ones. So that's a good call out. But yeah, I think that's intentional. And so yeah, I've spun up a game of Avernum on. I picked normal difficulty because that I'm looking for a bit of a casual playthrough and I don't know what I'm getting into. And the systems are very like D&D inspired. Like I have a party of 4. Like I have a sort of a tanky warrior dude, a priest, a mage, and then like sort of a rogue / archer character. And you have 4 stats like strength, intelligence, endurance, and what is the 4? Dexterity. And then you have some like traits and feats that kind of play into. So my warrior, I've been investing a lot into like his swords, like swords and daggers, which gives him like every level of that gives him plus 1% chance to hit and plus 1% damage with those weapons. And then, there are feats that help shrug off damage and parry. Like it feels very sort of D&D inspired. And the concept, I like the concept. I think it's pretty cool. Like the sort of story setup is that I guess you could, it's a little bit analogous to kind of what Pyre did. You have this sort of, this planet or world that's kind of dominated by this empire. I mean, this is very swords and sorcery versus something like Pyre, but yeah, Avernum, like you have this world that's dominated by this empire in this sort of swords and sorcery fantasy setting, and they, whenever they have people who they don't agree with, like dissidents or whatever, there's this magical portal to this sort of underworld called Avernum. So they basically send you into like the depths of the earth, and you get there like. You don't know what it's going to be like, but it's actually like this sort of fantasy Underdark, like maybe not quite as grim and oppressive as like the Underdark from the Forgotten Realms, but it's like a cavernous system where people live off of like mushrooms and lizard meat. And you kind of like find yourself exploring this fantasy cavernous like underworld and trying to kind of establish yourself as sort of an adventurer and see, I guess, help the Avernites survive, make a way out. Like, I guess I'm not sure exactly 100% where the quest arc is, the main quest arc is going.
Right.
So that's been pretty cool. And actually, it's a very light, it's a very light touch. So sometimes like I'll have like a show, for example, I watched Dragon Ball while I was playing Avernum because, while I'm moving these characters around, like sometimes it has these stretches of light gameplay where you can just kind of click around and watch something in the background. That's been kind of neat.
Right. Yeah. So is this sort of like one of those like 100+ hour kind of deals, or have they shortened it up for modern audiences, or
I'm not sure yet. It's a 3-part series. I don't know if we'll see how the first arc wraps up. I don't think it's quite like 100 hours. It might be like 20 to 40 hours, but I don't remember if I looked that up. Okay. I don't think it's quite like, especially being a multi-part series, I don't think it's quite as heavyweight.
Right, because I'm just thinking back to Pillars of Eternity, and that one, that was kind of a modern take on some of those old CRPGs, and they did not shorten that one at all. That one about 1 million hours, and I was wondering if that.
It was like 50 hours. I mean,
yeah. But I mean, it's not
short,
20.
but it's not like obscenely long either.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely get what you're saying, though. I mean, if you played like a Ultima or a Vampire or whatever from the old days, like, you could definitely sink some time into it, especially because I feel like Avernum too has been a bit more handholdy. Like, it's not super handholdy. I mean, it definitely has some of its kind of arcane, like hands off, but it's also not like, you should go to this place and I'm not going to tell you where it is or describe anything about it. It's more like, yeah, the next town is like, if you follow the road east, like, I've heard they need some help. So it's been a lot more, it's not like I have to go find the right square in some, mountain pathway that's that the game doesn't explain whatsoever.
Right. Okay.
So that's been pretty cool.
Seems pretty neat.
Yeah. It's something light, something old school. Like, I don't know that I think it's probably scratched the itch well enough that I won't be rushing into any of the sequels, but we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Then the other game I've been playing, we talked about a little bit on the last cast, and I think the other panelists have also been on it. I think I got to a stopping point in Dead Cells.
Okay.
I guess some minor gameplay spoilers here. So I finished a run on the hard difficulty. And that was about as far as I wanted to go.
So is hard something that comes after you beat the game once on normal?
Yeah, it actually seems like there may be like 4 difficulty levels after you beat the game on normal.
Yeah, because I was reading something about how when you beat the game, you like get a boss cell or something like that. And is that what ups the difficulty?
Yeah, basically, yeah, you get that boss cell, and then okay, so this is maybe less minor gameplay spoilers, but
You don't have to get into it if you don't want to, but
yeah, no, I'm totally down with it. Just
I don't care.
Warning for anyone. So yeah, you beat the boss, you get a boss cell, and then you kind of toggle like how many boss cells you want to turn on. And that
like
changes.
A risk reward thing.
Well, I think it's straight up a progression thing.
Oh,
like
okay.
If you want to, I don't know if there's a true ending or what, but it's like,
yeah.
It definitely seems like the game because I beat the game on normal again after and you don't really get anything for doing that other than the cells and the permanent progression stuff. Like, you don't get anything special for rebeating the game on normal.
Yeah, the sense I got was, you're right, that it seems to be like a progression, because it looks like you can get up to 4 of those boss cells. So it is basically like there are 4 steps up the difficulty. It just keeps going. And correct me if I'm wrong, or I guess this is more a question, when you beat the game on normal, did it give you any kind of hint that like, oh, this isn't over, like this keeps going?
Yeah, like, again, spoilers. So your character, like, once you finish the game, your little plant thing like pops out and goes into a pipe, and you roll back into the prison and pick up a new body. And then he like looks around and he's like, why hasn't anything changed? He's like, he's like, I killed the king. Why is nothing different? And then, yeah, you put on the boss sale and it's like, I think something's a little different. And really, in terms of path and progression, it's, it doesn't seem to change anything story-wise. It just makes the game harder, and you get more boss cells.
How does it make the game harder? Is it just enemies hit harder and take more hits, or do they actually like remix what enemies you find? Do they put more enemies? Like, what ways do they make it harder?
I get the sense, so there are a few things they do, and there are a couple meta points, I guess, some summary thoughts I have as well, but I think the enemies do hit harder. I don't know if they changed the enemies, but I found myself noticing certain types of enemies more because I guess they're just more dangerous on the hard difficulty. So I don't know if that's because they added different types or if it's just because the enemies become more dangerous. Like the wizards who can shoot in any direction. Mm-hmm. I know that in hard mode they're in the first level, and I think that's the same in normal, but I could just, you can shrug off their hits so easily in normal. That's not necessarily true, but it just seems like it's more dangerous in the harder difficulty. But the other big thing they do is they take away some of the health refills. So I think the enemies hit harder and they take away some of the health refills. And in particular, they take away the one before the final boss.
When you say health refills, you mean like the in-between level refill your potions?
Yes.
Okay.
So
yeah, that's brutal.
In the normal playthrough, anytime you reach the end of one level, and that in-between spot, you get a guaranteed health top-off. In hard one, and I think it's fixed. I don't think it's randomized. Certain in between spots, it's just broken, and so I don't know. I have some mixed feelings about that. Some of those systems in general. I guess I'll go ahead and drop those. On one hand, it adds sort of this resource management dynamic to the game, which I think is interesting, and I think it could make some of those trees like survival that I basically never looked at more meaningful, because some of the survival skills like help you regenerate health when you kill enemies and stuff like that. But on the other hand, like some of that game's difficulty scaling, I have mixed feelings about it because it plays out so quickly that things can go wrong so fast. Mm-hmm. And also, like, particularly in some of those final levels, like the castle, you have these like clusters of enemies, and then like the game will have randomly put like spinning balls like in or around these clusters of enemies, or they'll put like spike traps on top of or on the bottom of ladders, on the top of a ladder or like on the bottom of a pit that you want to jump down. So it makes it really like when you want to get that boss run and you're trying not to take any damage because you're not going to get a health refill before the final boss, and you're having to jump into these clusters of enemies, like even if it's just to set traps and run away, like and these enemies can like shoot through walls and stuff. I don't know.
You can go from full to zero like in 2 seconds in this game.
Yeah, and when you're if you're doing a preparatory run, trying to take a long path and get a bunch of cells and upgrades to make sure you're good for the final boss, like, these runs aren't short. They're like 40 to 60 minutes easily. Mm-hmm. And then, like you get to the final boss and he creams you in a couple hits, or like you're in the king's castle and you're having an okay run, but then you're having to like fight like a dude who can grapple and a dude who can stab you through walls and a dude who can shoot in any direction, and then you account for all that, but then you don't see a spinning ball like that's just off the top of the screen and it hits you for a third of your health. It's like, I don't know, that some of that stuff, it doesn't feel like, I guess it's punishing in a way that's not like that. Yeah, no, I mean, I've had a lot of the same experiences because like I've reached the final boss once on normal, and I've gone through like those later stages, like the High Peak Castle in particular, which you mentioned is just insane with that stuff. And it's like, I don't know if it's like maybe I should go look up videos of like quote unquote like
pro Dead Cells players or whatever, because like I'm curious how they handle those situations, because for me, my experience sounds similar to yours, where it's like if you get in there, if you don't pay attention to literally everything on screen, and also like you have to within split seconds notice everything that's going on and then react the exact right way, and any slight misstep could mean half your health or more in a matter of seconds. And it makes jumping in there, like you said, just feel incredibly dangerous and punishing. And how I've been dealing with all the late game encounters is have a good set of traps, run into the fight, like, well, not into the fight, but like run near the enemies, press the left trigger, right trigger really quickly, and then run away.
That works for a lot of that game.
Yeah, and then if I have good enough gear, that'll kill all the stuff. And if not, I'll wait for the cooldowns to reset and do it again.
That sounds infuriating to me.
Yeah, and it makes... I'm really curious for both, because Ryan, Nate, and I have all played a chunk of this game. I'm curious for you guys, if either of you have had success doing melee combat with more than like one enemy, like for anything more than one-on-one. Like, have you had success with melee combat in those late game stages? Because I have not.
I mean, honestly, I don't know that I've made it to a late game. Like, unless I just
like the High Peak Castle, for example, on normal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what I'm saying is like I don't know that I've made it to the late game with a pure melee focused build.
Yeah, I don't know that I do that very often.
If I happen to have picked up a solid melee weapon, like I like, I honestly prefer to have something like the infantry bow in my primary weapon slot. But if I happen to have picked up a good gold melee weapon, like a lot of times I'll just use that more as a support tool if I get in a crunch or to do extra DPS on the boss. But I don't know, like I don't think I've gotten to the later stages with like a brutality or a survival based build.
Yeah, the best builds that I've had in that game are either using a bow and lots of traps and stuff like that, or like those sort of like short but not close range weapons like the whip and the little like flame vials that you can toss really quickly.
Oh, the flame vials are the best.
Those are really good. But yeah, like pure melee, like a sword or the stupid kicky sandals or whatever. Like I just can't ever get to late game with those builds.
Yeah, and it's like if it's one-on-one, like I usually have a melee weapon, and it's like if you sneak up on someone, you can, like, because the melee weapons do deal a ton of damage, and it's like if you sneak on someone, you can hit them, you can stun them, and you can just mow them down real fast. But like the second you get into a group of enemies, it's like I feel like getting in there in melee is just, I'm just gonna die.
Yeah, it definitely feels like some of the like they have enemies that literally just hurt you if you hit them with melee. And I feel like with the bow weapons, there's less of that. Like they don't have as much stuff that just straight up punishes you for using a range strategy.
Definitely.
I mean, I guess I'll step back a bit and say that this game is a lot of fun. Like the reason I played it for 2 runs is because I like the action, and I think it does some neat things with storytelling, and like it has some interesting variation. And I could see, like, I mean, I don't think I want to invest a ton of time in it. If I had a lot of time, I could even see like trying some hard 2 runs, like maybe trying to do some like double grenade builds or work in some survival options. Like, because some of the grenades give you like pretty big damage reductions, and I wonder if that would help compensate for some of the melee softness. But I think there are some issues with like, as a roguelike game, if you're going to have a twitchy, punishing game, like Downwell had pretty short runs. So yeah, it was frustrating to get to the 4th stage and lose, but that was like maybe a 20-minute, 30-minute run.
At tops. I feel like, I mean, I didn't get to the end game of Downwell, but I feel like my runs, like a good run would be in the 10, 15-minute range. So yeah, I can't imagine that game at its longest being more than 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah. And then with a game like FTL, those runs can take like 40 to 60 minutes, but it's more like a turn-based. So you have a good feel for what's going on, and you can constantly pause, and like, generally speaking, like some things can go unexpectedly one way or the other, but like you can kind of control the action and see how things play out. Whereas,
Yeah.
I think that's one thing I had. And then I was just going to say also, like, the permanent progression in Dead Cells, I feel like maybe there are more interesting builds, but I found that a lot of the unlocks that I've found don't really, like, I feel like maybe there are some other interesting build options in there, but I just haven't seen it. Like, I haven't seen anything good in the survival tree as far as I can tell. And
What is even in the survival? Is it just mostly shields?
Some types of bows and traps can use survival.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder because, as I'm getting into this hard too, it's like, okay, this stuff like that skill necromancy where killing an enemy gives you a little health back, like that stuff could become really powerful if you could build around it somehow. But like, I don't want to waste any DPS in my trade upgrades, speccing into survival, especially since none of the equipment and like only one of the mutations seems worth anything. Like,
I'd be really curious if people have success. Like, I would like to see what a good survival build looks like, because I just have a hard time envisioning it.
Shield parries are really powerful, but not really helpful against bosses.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
And they're really, like, if you miss the timing, that's bad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe it's just because there are some blueprints that give you, like, maybe there are a couple of, like, cool mutations out there and in these other trees that would really but I found that that's another thing too at the permanent progression, is I found that most of the unlocks, other than just like generic, like most of the weapon and power unlocks were either horizontal or a downgrade from kind of the base game stuff. There were one or two I found that I really liked, but most of the other stuff I would unlock it, and then I'd be like, man, like I kind of wish I hadn't unlocked this because I don't want to see this anymore.
I had that exact. And I messaged you guys in our Discord. I was like, hey, is there any way to roll back these unlocks? Because I like 3/4 of the things I unlock, I feel like you're just diluting my pool.
Yeah, I think that's a really big shame with this particular progression system, is that you can spend all this stuff unlocking different things and then feel like it actually didn't gain you anything, or actually might be hindering your future runs at the same time.
Yeah, it's like you can permanently progress backwards.
Yeah.
The way you can't undo.
And also, I don't know if you guys are aware of this. I was looking up earlier this week some ideas for, like, okay, are there ways to play this game that I haven't thought of yet? Like, maybe I should try some different things, because I was kind of getting burnt out on it and didn't really feel like trying to push through anymore. And I found out that even within a run, I think some of the progression is weird, in that apparently when you pick up the power scrolls to upgrade one of your stats, it also buffs all the enemies.
Huh?
Oh,
wow.
So
I didn't realize that either.
There are some strategies I found that are like, yeah, don't pick those up because they're actually kind of bad.
Great.
Huh.
And I'm like, okay, this is a really stupid progression system.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that, like, let's say every power scroll you picked up, you put in, let's just say, tactics.
Yeah.
And all 4 of your items were tactics. So you're getting plus 15% buff to all 4 of your items. Then, like, I would hope that would outpace the enemy's growth, and, like, that would still be a good build. But I don't know. I didn't realize. I think
there are ways to get the stat upgrades and it still be net beneficial, but you can't just take them at face value as a net benefit, which I think is silly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting, because I didn't know that for sure. And I mean, I did feel like, the runs where I had like 18 purple or whatever, which some of that comes off of your legendary items and your necklaces. So maybe that was kind of pushing it over the top. But the times when I invested purely into one DPS stat, I did feel like it would kill the enemies more quickly, which was basically what I wanted. Plus it buffs your mutations for things like resetting your trap cooldown. So in my experience, it was worth kind of, if you drilling into one stat and then maybe taking a little bit off the other ones to buff your health.
For the health boost, yeah. Yeah, when I first started, I was keeping things kind of even because that's how you get the most health. And then
Oh yeah,
I realized that
just
after a
wrecked
couple runs,
me.
I realized that was not good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. I guess because of that enemy scaling, like yeah, those hybrid builds just feel like not good. Like they
Yeah,
just
like
feel like.
focusing into one is really how you get your damage output up.
But
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Yeah, do you know if that affects the bosses as well?
I think so, based on what I was reading at least, and it seemed like people were trying to figure it out because they don't surface any of this. So
No.
people were trying to like do different runs and like take down all the numbers and crunch it and figure out what exactly was happening. And it seems like people think that that is a thing in the game, which I think is completely ridiculous.
Yeah, well, I guess
Yeah.
it makes sense because I had kind of wondered, like, I had started to do preparation. I had started taking the longest routes possible
Mm-hmm.
and trying to get as many of the power scrolls to really get my tactics trait as high as possible. Because when I go into that boss fight, like, I want my traps to really just be like hurting him,
Hmm.
and like, if I'm using an infantry bow or a freeze attack or whatever, like I want it to be. And I assume, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, but one thing that I didn't do remember people saying in these threads that I was going through like a madman, is that like if you do drill into one stat enough, it gives you less percent increase in health every time.
Hmm.
Right.
And so like at some point the enemy's damage output is higher than the percent health increase you get.
Man.
Yeah.
So you're actually losing ground on health by taking those past a certain point. And it's just like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe that's why the tactics builds, the way that we've been playing and the way that, intuitively, I think most players would approach the game. Maybe that's why the range combat builds are the only ones that feel viable.
Because otherwise you just get one shot by everything.
Yeah. I mean, even with those builds,
Yeah,
like
even
I
with those,
found,
you get
it's
one shot.
you don't have a lot of room to wiggle, but because you're fighting at range, like
Mm-hmm.
you are less likely to get hit.
You guys, so this is something I've really been struggling with this game. Do you guys like the way it feels to control?
I generally do. I think it's pretty responsive, pretty snappy. I like a lot of the feel on the like roll and like busting in doors and doing like the ground pound thing. Those all feel good.
Yeah. I don't have a big problem with that. Sometimes you get stuck with a weapon that has a really slow wind up, and I just don't like. Again, like coming back to the game's randomization, like if you're stuck with a marksman bow and like you're fighting those like these guys that teleport next to you and swing
Yeah, it's pretty
instantly.
much useless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like, how do I do this? I've literally just lost runs because I can't. My weapon animation is slower than the enemies like teleporting beside of me and whacking me.
Yeah, I feel like the game feels slippery to me. It's like I feel like my character is always sliding around, and I've even experimented like just standing still and mashing attack, and like your character moves a lot.
Yeah, you definitely do move a lot, especially with certain weapon types. Like some of them have a lot of like lunge or slide involved in the weapon animations.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like that has gotten me in trouble a lot when I get in frantic melee situations.
Yeah.
And I feel like that, as much as anything, gets me hurt. Because it's like, once you have to start reacting quickly, I feel like I just don't have the control I want to be able to maneuver properly.
Mm-hmm.
And the game, as we've been saying, like at the very end, those last couple levels, like put you in those situations a lot. So like a lot of the times when I take my biggest hits are like, when I'm just trying to maneuver and like when I'm trying to be precise, because the game demands a lot of precision in the late game. When I'm trying to be precise, and then it's like I slip just a little too far based on some animation or something, and it's like, oh, now I get punished heavily.
Yeah, I mean, I do think all those movements and animations are consistent. It's just like
they are, yes.
You just have to get used to whatever loadout you have.
Yeah,
well, I think there's I feel like it's slippery no matter what loadout you use.
I mean, it is slippery, but it is consistent, so it's just getting used to the feel of it, I guess. I mean, that doesn't mean you have to like it. It's just
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was asking. I was just
Yeah.
curious if you guys, because after playing a couple hours, I was like, I just don't think I like the way this game feels.
right.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't think the flow of its movement and attacks works for me, given the just complete frantic nature of the combat.
I only have that issue whenever I have certain types of weapons, which I don't like. I actually think the range combat is, for most weapons, is pretty good. Like, it has a lot of tracking and it's very helpful. But some the melee, like especially with things like the broadsword, the nutcracker, like, and even some of the daggers, like they have these kind of like loopy combos with big finishers, and I find that if you're not perfect,
I'm just like,
on the
I just want to
timing-
stand still and attack. Why can't I?
yeah, a lot of the melee weapons and the combos, like, I have trouble with, but I haven't been playing melee, so I guess I haven't been feeling that issue a ton.
Yeah, I wish. Like, I think there are good things in this game, but I have a lot of frustrations with it, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like something with the progression or the late game balance, or I don't know, something I feel like needs a lot of tweaking. And because like I do not enjoy the late game at all. Like, I feel like it is, like we were saying, just throw the traps down and run away.
Yeah.
And the game also has it basically runs down the checkboxes of the roguelike features I don't like.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess that's what this game is, so take it or leave it. But I think there's a lot of good ideas in here. I don't know. I don't know if I'll play it anymore, so I've reached the final boss once.
Mm-hmm.
And I got his health down, like, I probably took off a third of his health in about 5 seconds. And then I died. And I basically got one. It wasn't one single hit that killed me, but it was like 1 second I died. Like,
Yeah.
a bunch of things hit me at once and I was just dead. And I had 3 health potions that I didn't use any of. It's just I didn't have a chance.
Mm-hmm.
But so I might play it a couple more times just to try and beat the boss on normal. But like Ryan said, that's like a 40-60 minute run, and you can play that long and go from full health to 0 in 1 second. So I'm so tired of playing those early stages.
Yeah.
Like,
So
20-minute section where I'm just going through the easy early stages is just like, I don't need to do this anymore.
So I'm going to take a guess that if there was one game that I should never even think about playing, it's
Yeah, I feel pretty confident saying, Paul, that Dead Cells is not the game for you.
all right. Now I'm going to put that on my list.
Yeah, and some of the permanent progression stuff, it just feels like
It's not great.
when Rogue Legacy came out, people were like, "Oh, I love having permanent progression." So like, even if I die on a run, like, I get something out of it. But then to me, that just kind of makes it feel grindy.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, I
it's like,
didn't.
you really want more uses of your health flask, but it takes a ton of cells to upgrade that.
And
So then
especially, like, I remember playing Invisible Ink, which was kind of, I don't know if it was where it falls into these games, but I remember feeling like the game expects you to lose at least once because, it's going to provide you with some stuff, through the death that you need in your future runs. And it's kind of like, well, when you get to that point, where you're expected to lose so you can actually get better, it does feel grindy.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, I mean, Dead Cells, I think, doesn't do that as much with its permanent progression. Like, I think it expects you to lose just because it's hard. But it,
Right.
But I
mean,
mean,
outside
I
of the
also think
health,
stuff like the potions, it kind of, I mean, I guess you could get through without using any potions, but I think there are a couple important things like that you really want to unlock.
yeah, outside of the health flasks, I would say there isn't much of that. And, really in some of the harder difficulties, you don't always have that many health flasks or chance to use them. So they're definitely a huge help, but I feel like the game doesn't, it's not like Rogue Legacy where you basically have to level your guy up through dying
I
over
definitely
and
agree
over.
that this progression isn't frustrating as Rogue's Legacies was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird because like this game is getting just lauded as like one of the best action games ever, and I don't know. There are ideas I like about it, but there's also a lot of frustrating things about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed it, but yeah, I do feel like we've talked about, sometimes the difficulty curve and the progression doesn't quite fit, and I guess the variety, this permanent progression in roguelikes, I think, is a fairly modern concept, and sometimes it's cool in that when games do it well, and that a lot of times it unlocks new options, or it gives you a little bit of it makes things a little easier after you've lost a few runs. But I think with Dead Cells, it doesn't feel like it's giving much that's interesting or helpful. It's not even really a consolation prize for some of those challenging runs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like the first half of the game, I basically have down pat enough just from memorization that like I know all the enemies' attack patterns because I've seen them enough times, and like, yeah, there's just not much variety in that stuff. And I feel like even the final boss, like I feel like if I could just try him a couple more times, I would have his patterns down and probably wouldn't be that big of a deal. But it's like, to try him one time, I have to go through 40 plus minutes. And I don't know if I want to do that because the first half of the game, with the lack of variety, has gotten very boring. Because in theory, that's supposed to be the thing about roguelites, is that every run is more varied. But I don't know, like those first couple levels I've run a dozen plus times, and they feel pretty much the same every time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep, I don't disagree. There are some branching paths I opened up, which make things a little more interesting, but yeah, the basic structure doesn't change that much from within those levels.
Yeah.
Well, so now that we're adults talked about Dead Cells, has that been
I knew that was going to be the game for this one because I think that's primarily what us three have been playing.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fine. Just Ryan, did you have anything else that you wanted to touch on while we're talking about it?
Nothing new. Those were the big ones.
Okay, all right. Flex, have you been playing anything other than Dead Cells that you wanted to talk about?
One other thing, just for a little bit. Dead Cells is far and away the thing I've played the most lately. Played a little more Monster Hunter World, but I don't really have anything to say about it. But last night I started and played a couple hours of Guacamelee 2.
Guacamelee!
Yeah.
Which... Is it terrible?
I'm sorry?
Is it terrible?
No, it's not terrible.
Okay, good.
It is very much more Guacamelee, and I totally forgot how much of a reference machine Guacamelee was.
Yeah.
Because right out of the gate, they totally hit me with the "what is a man" reference. Like within the first 2 minutes, and I was just like, do I actually want to do this? Is this really a good thing to do?
If they at least contain it all to video game references, I would be okay with it. Hopefully there's not posters of internet memes everywhere in this one.
I have not seen as many identifiable internet memes. It's also possible I'm not as savvy with internet memes as I was in 2013. I did see what is very obviously a Black Panther poster.
Yeah.
So there's clearly like some Marvel references in there. I've seen some Lord of the Rings references. Which, by the way, Dead Cells also has Lord of the Rings references.
Mm.
One of the item references straight up mentions Legolas by name.
Cool.
Nice.
So there's definitely non-video game stuff in here. I don't know if it goes so far as general internet memes or not.
Right.
From the couple hours I've played, I have not seen any of that. In terms of video game references, I actually started writing down some of them.
Oh boy.
Obviously, Castlevania and Metroid, a lot of references. Because the game claims to be a Metroidvania. There was a very overt Limbo reference. Straight up, that giant spider is in it.
Okay.
All right.
There's a Bad Dudes reference. Double Dragon, River City Ransom, Zelda.
Okay.
So all of those very obviously in there, and there's probably a bunch of references I haven't noticed,
Yeah.
like that are referencing something that I just don't pick up on. So within the first like 2 hours, that's what I've seen.
Well, all right. But that first game, from what I remember, was, despite all of the silly references, was like a pretty competent action game, platformer, beat 'em up kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what it is. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a action platformer or beat 'em up, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like honestly, I don't like any of the reference stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty dumb. All of this game's dialogue and thematic trappings, I think, is pretty silly. Even though I like the art style, but yeah, actually playing it is pretty fun. I'm still early, but I've already gotten a lot of abilities and upgrades at a good pace, and there's like a skill tree you can buy upgrades. Like I think the combat's pretty snappy and fun. My favorite stuff's probably actually the platforming. Like they do they've already done some pretty clever like platforming gauntlets that require like good timing on your jumps and good use of your abilities. So like if you remember in the first game, the uppercut that like launches you upwards as part of your platforming. And they've also been playing with, and you can like dodge in the air. So like a lot of times during your platforming, you'll have to dodge stuff as you're jumping. And then they've also done, I think this was in the first game, at least towards the end of the game, like dimension shifting stuff.
Yeah, that stuff was really cool.
Yeah, so they've already started working that stuff in, and I think those are my favorite segments, is when you're like doing a platforming gauntlet that involves that dimension shifting stuff, because yeah, you just really have to think about where you're jumping and the timing of it all. And I think that all works pretty well. The combat can be pretty simple. So when they like lock me into a combat room, it's like, all right, I'm going to mash attack for a little bit and then this will be done. So that's not always super exciting, but
right.
But I think the mashup of attacking, like the combat with the platforming, I think is where that game's at its best.
Yeah.
And yeah, so far it's been pretty fun. I remember liking the first Guacamelee quite a bit.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, and this game seems very much more the same. My one worry with it going forward, I mean, other than the humor that I don't really like that style of humor, my only concern is that thus far, like all of the combat and platforming and everything has been fun. It also feels a little like 5+ years old.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha.
So my concern going forward is maybe it is a little too much of more Guacamelee in the sense that it doesn't feel like it's kept up with the times. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I mean, it still seems to be doing that as well as Guacamelee 1 did it, and I liked that game quite a bit. So, I think for anyone who did like that game, this seems like more of it.
Okay.
Nice.
Seems pretty solid so far. Just starting out, so we'll see how it goes. I can turn into a chicken now.
That sounds
Okay.
neat.
That's pretty fun.
And how far into the game are you so far?
Just like 2 hours.
Okay. All right. So expect to hear more from that at the next ATACS. All right. Nate, what about you? What you been doing?
Other than Dead Cells, which we've thoroughly covered, I have been playing SteamWorld Heist.
SteamWorld Heist. That's a good video game.
That's a very good video game.
It is.
Some may say one of the best games of 2015.
It probably is / was.
I'm picking on Will here. There's an inside joke.
But yeah, it's a very good 2D tactics game, tactics RPG kind of.
All right.
Is that what you would call it?
Is it a Metroidvania?
Yeah, it's a Metroidvania.
Is it the Dark Souls of Metroidvanias?
It's the Dark Souls of roguelike Metroidvanias.
All right.
I hate everything.
That sound you hear is the slow crushing of Flex's soul.
But yeah, I mean,
you could almost call it a like side view, like 2D XCOM in a way.
Yeah, it definitely.
You wanted
has
to be
some
like very
similarities.
reductive about it.
Mm-hmm. You got your steam powered robots. They all have special abilities. They gain experience from doing missions. All the missions entail boarding and hostile ship and shooting all the enemy robots. So you move your guys around turn by turn. You aim manually, kind of like Valkyria Chronicles, I guess.
Yep.
Okay.
And then try to kill everybody and get all the loot and get out. So it's every mission is like a heist.
Yeah. It's SteamWorld Heist.
Yeah.
Do you like
SteamWorld
the
Heist.
aiming part of it? Because I kind of like that. Like there are times where it's like I really need to nail this shot, and you're like it's kind of tense.
It is kind of tense because it's not always super precise, like easy to tell where your shot's going to go, and their arms waver a little bit as you hold it there. So
That's why you get the laser sight, man.
yeah, if you have a gun with a laser sight, that helps a ton. Then you can do like cool trick shots by banking it off of a wall and stuff.
Yeah.
So
But at the same
that's all fun.
time, I think the fact that you know it's you who did it. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. I think I actually like that a lot more than like
Better than
I
just
missed
like
my 50% shot
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, I kind of like that. Yeah, in both Valkyria Chronicles and this, I kind of like what Will was saying, like it being on you to make the shot. I kind of like that.
Yeah, that is true. Because if it was like, oh, I just selected an enemy to target and it says I have an 80% shot, I'm just going to be mad every time I miss.
Right.
But now I can only blame myself. But yeah, it's cool. I like a lot of the characters and their abilities. I feel like one thing that I like is that it's pretty player friendly in terms of like, oh, if you fail a mission or have to go back because somebody died and you want to get a 3-star rating on a mission, it just kind of lets you do that stuff. You could grind to get your characters up if you wanted to. But then on the other hand, like I don't really want to sit and grind out my party, but I have all these characters that I kind of want to see what their higher level abilities are.
Yeah,
Right.
But I
and
just
some
got
of them get really cool. Like I remember the characters. Both you and Will have played this more recently than me, so you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong. But I remember the characters having pretty diverse set of abilities, especially at higher level.
Yeah. And so like I want to see what all the different characters' abilities are, but I just have my like team of 3 that I've been using since the start of the game that are way higher level than everybody.
Right.
It's like, okay, do I sit and grind to see what the other guys can do, or do I try to bring in lower level people to get
Right.
them caught up? But that seems wasteful. So that part's a little not exactly what I would want. Like I would
Who
almost.
are your favorites?
So I've been using the main captain,
Piper, of course.
Piper, yeah, because she's just all around good and has the team buff skills and heals.
Yeah, I
and
remember
stuff.
her team buffs being amazing.
And then the big buff guy, Ivansky.
Oh yeah.
He's like a tank character,
Mm-hmm.
so he has a lot of health. He gets a buff if he takes damage on a turn. He'll do extra damage the next turn. He has an ability he can do to make himself invincible for a turn. And then I've been using, I don't remember her name, but she's the character who gets an extra shot when she kills somebody.
Maybe
And
Sally Bolt.
That's probably right. And she uses shotguns, so she's moving through with shotguns, and then if she gets a kill, she gets an extra shot for free. So just kind of rampages through guys.
Oh yeah.
Right.
My mainstays were Piper. I rotated between Sally and Gabriel, the sea bass, or sea brass or whatever. And then another one, I always had Bay or B or whatever. She has like this big rocket launcher or like grenade launcher or something. But that was my squad.
Yeah.
I didn't really.
I feel like I switched around a lot actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I switched around a lot at the beginning, but then I started realizing like, oh, only the people on the mission get experience, and I'm only ever really going to be able to take 3 people on most missions, so I should just pick 3 and stick with them.
Gotcha.
I also remember really appreciating the game's difficulty slider, which you can adjust any time.
Yeah.
And higher difficulty nets you more experience, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so that's good. I like that too.
I always think options like that are cool.
So yeah, I like a lot of it. I think the SteamWorld games, like there's been 2, the SteamWorld Digs, and then this one. I think those are all just like really well thought out games of their type, like well produced, well thought out, good pacing, good progression. Like they just know what they're doing, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, they're very well made games.
Yeah.
And quick poll here: Dig or Heist?
I'll have to finish Heist before I say for sure.
I'm a Heist man.
I haven't
Yeah,
tried
man.
Heist yet.
I tried to Dig when it was on PS Plus, and I couldn't really get into it. So I'm
Okay.
obviously on the Heist train.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Heist man. Yeah, because they're both very simple but very well done types of the games they are.
Yeah.
Well,
and I think Heist, maybe it's just I like that kind of game more,
Yeah,
but
totally.
I felt like there was more to engage with in Heist, like the different character abilities and like the design of the missions. Like I felt like there was more interesting stuff going on there.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it depends on what sort of things you like. But I was thinking about it as I was playing through Heist, and like I didn't miss any of like the base stuff that I did in like an XCOM game. Like I
That's
didn't
true.
say, well, oh man, like wouldn't it be great if I could like excavate or have some research going or or have to build another satellite and send it out or respond to a threat. Like I don't know. I didn't miss any of the things that it seemed like this one kind of pared down. It was more
Right.
direct. Get you some loot, equip your duders, get out there and line up some headshots, or whatever it is. Like,
yeah, those long range, like bank off of 3 walls and a barrel to get a headshot from behind the guy are like the most satisfying
and then it
thing
slows
ever.
down the game. It's like, it's like Robot Sniper Elite.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's good. It's
Yeah,
fun.
so you're enjoying it?
Yeah.
How far do you think you are?
I think I've played like 8 or 9 hours.
Okay.
I'm in this, like, I did like one big map where you finish that and then move to like a second area.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't know, maybe halfway through that second area.
Okay.
Yeah, you're probably making pretty good progress. I wouldn't, from what I remember, I don't think the game's too much longer than that.
Yeah.
I would guess in the 10, 15 hour range, but
yeah, but they started introducing a bunch of new enemy types, like guys who walk around with little riot shields and this weird like goop that they'll spray on the ground and then it explodes if it gets shot, and like things are getting pretty crazy in Steambot space.
Steambot space.
I also just like the thematic trappings of that, because like Dig is like a Western with robots, but like, I don't know, space robots are pretty cool too.
Yeah.
I like some of the thematic pinnings around that.
Mm-hmm.
Did you play anything else, Nate?
That's pretty much been it.
All right. Will, could you tell me about speed dating for ghosts, please?
Yeah. I was going to talk about that one anyway. So,
good.
So yeah, I just read the title basically and saw that it was semi well received, and I was like, I got to see what this is about. And so I did.
I gotta check this shit out.
And basically, you start and you're a ghost. Obviously, you pick one of 3 rooms, and there are 3 ghosts in each room, and you have 2 brief rounds of conversation with each of the 3 ghosts, and then you pick one to take on a date. And I guess at first I got into it just because I thought it was going to be kind of funny and quirky. I don't know if anybody saw the screenshot that I posted on Steam, but I went on a date with one called Gary, and he wore a bow tie, and I thought that was fantastic.
Dude, he's got that bow tie.
But the interesting thing about it for me is that, like, I just expected it to be kind of funny and quirky, but I think there's some deep pieces to it. Like, for instance, dating as a ghost, however ludicrous that sounds, removes a lot of the pieces that I guess you would traditionally see as part of dating. Like, for instance, like whether somebody has a stable like income, like that doesn't matter. Physical appearance doesn't really matter, because like basically you're ghosts. I don't know if there's any kind of ghost intercourse. I assume that there wasn't. So that didn't really seem to matter to me. Also, I guess just to me, it seems like just coolness. If you're cool, who cares? Like, it's just to me, it boils everything down to just like, is this a personality that you'd like to spend time with? Which in some ways is kind of neat and refreshing. And the weird thing is like, I guess if you go out on a date, like normally, maybe someone is super confident because they know they look good or they drive up in a really nice car. And the equivalent of that in speed dating for Ghost is someone who just thinks that they're like super scary. They walk up and they're like, they're like, oh, I've been around since the plague in 1515 and, or whatever. And so that's kind of like the equivalent of like pride for the Ghost is just, I'm the spookiest around or whatever. But I thought it was kind of fun. I wouldn't say that it was anything life changing or I had any major epiphanies, but I had a good time with it. And, I played through each of the rooms once, and then I went back and went through one again because there was one other ghost. That's Gary that Flex just posted in the channel, and I wanted to make sure I took out Gary, because he had a rough time. And he just needed a little love.
That's very considerate of you, Will.
Yeah. So that was speed dating for Ghosts. It was a blast. Anyway, another thing that I've been messing with recently is I played through, and I've been sort of on the fence with these games a while, but I played through one of these like FMV decision games called Late Shift. I don't know if anyone.
Yeah, I was hoping that you would kind of touch on this one because I was reading what you
is this
wrote.
the game? I need to figure out if this is the game. I think it is.
It's like this sort of thriller that has like choices that you can make.
Yes.
I guess like every 5 minutes or something.
This is 100% the game I think it is, and Giant Bomb's quick look at this was hilarious.
Yeah. So.
This is exciting.
And, it was, I actually thought it was pretty cool. I mean, I think, to me, like it looked like the production values were like as good as like your TV show, like your average TV show and stuff. And some of the situations that it puts you in, like, I guess I tried to kind of get out of them, but it kind of keeps pulling you back into them. So you're like, oh man, get out of here, dude. And then like some other guy will grab you and like, you can't really get out of the situation. But once you're in the situation, like it's kind of brutal, cause there's just this really long winding, thriller story. I'd say, I mean, it kept me engaged for the entirety of its playtime. I was like, what's going to happen here and what's going down? I think the big issue for me is that there's some decisions that you make in the late game, and those decisions are a lot more difficult if you've established this relationship with this other character called Mei Ling. But I don't feel like the game really it doesn't really give you the opportunity to actually feel any sort of, I guess, attraction or kinship with this person. And so at the end, it was like, do you want to go save Mei Ling? And I was like, why? I'm not interested. Like she got me into some shit, man. I'm not interested in helping that girl.
What the hell? She's just trouble.
Yeah, she is trouble, man. Also, the main character, like, and I know that they wanted to give him like a distinct personality, and maybe they didn't quite know how to do it. But he's like, he relates everything to math, and it's like, I mean, like Fowler's a math major, Flex is a math major, okay, and so there are times when we're talking about games that he's like, well, maybe you only have a 33% chance of this, but this dude, like, I guess the way that the game, puts forward this guy as being a math dude is he's like, everywhere he goes, he's like, oh, they have a 50% chance of having sushi on the menu, just something. He's like, always, he just puts it into everything. And I think it's supposed to make his personality seem distinct, but it just makes him seem autistic. It's like, dude, come on.
That's a problem.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was pretty thrilling, and I was into it. But it was just kind of like some of the late game choices, and maybe the characterization could be a little bit better. But I mean, it was definitely better than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be like total cornball, and maybe it is.
Well,
I don't know.
I mean, from what I've seen of this game, it is pretty corny, but like in an entertaining way.
Yeah. So that was the late shift.
That's great that you played this, and sounds like you enjoyed it overall. How long?
Yeah.
I assume it was pretty short.
Yeah, it took me about an hour and a half. It's about as long as a movie.
Okay, gotcha.
But I think it might only be an hour. I might have like left it paused while I went and did something. But
if you,
it's one of these things where it wants you to like play through and get all the endings, and I'm never into that in these games. Like, I play a lot of games that are like, choose your adventure or make choices matter. That's the Steam tag. But I'm never interested in like, I just want to play it through, do what I think I would want to do, and then just kind of see how it plays out. I'm never interested in like playing through it like 4 times just to see every single little piece of what could happen.
Yeah. That's probably honestly a marketing thing as much as anything, because people get real crabby if you sell them a short game that has no replay value.
Right. And to me, it's like whatever. I mean, it was only an hour, but like if you look at this thing, you can tell that, geez, they hired actors. The dudes had to learn script. They got, cinematography. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
And I got it on sale for like whatever it's on sale for now, like $8.
Right now it's on sale for $7.79.
Yeah. So it was, I didn't feel like I like wasted my money or anything.
I'm kind of tempted.
Get it?
Do it, dude. It's the same length as a movie.
But anyway, so that was, and then
have you
go ahead.
This is probably not the same kind of game exactly, but if you want some more cheesy FMV shenanigans, I might suggest Contradiction Spot the Liar.
It's in my Steam library.
Perfect.
I haven't played it yet, but
it's quite magical.
I will be sure to report to ATACS.
I am looking forward to hearing.
That sounds awesome.
Other than that, I've been playing God of War and Monster Hunter World. Monster Hunter World at this point, I've finished, the main story arc and killed the Xeno'jiva. Been trying to kind of get the rank up to 50, where you can start taking on the Tempered Elders. If anyone hasn't played Monster World, this sounds like gibberish. And even if you have played Monster World, it kind of sounds like gibberish. But just kind of late game stuff. I think at this point, Flex said it best that Monster Hunter is kind of filling the role of a Borderlands. And so it's a situation where we all just kind of hop online and just piddle around. I mean, we all have these little tiny goals that we're trying to get. Like, it would be nice if I could make an armor set out of this bird, and then, oh, well, I'll go help you kill that bird, and so that's kind of the way it's going. Which is, it's fine. It's just interesting.
Yeah.
The God of War, I probably put the most time in over the past 2 weeks, and that's that's a lot of fun. I'm very much enjoying that. It's been talked about a number of times, I think, already on the podcast. I think, and I just I can't give that away. But anyway, I'm at this place now where I'm about to head into the realm of the dead. So that's kind of where I am in the game.
Okay. For the first,
yeah. So anyway, so the story's a big selling point here. So you don't really want to give too much away. I think.
Do you have another melee weapon?
I do.
Okay.
So I think right now the only real kind of gripes I have about it, I guess, is it's got. This is so funny to even talk about, but there are these areas in the game that you pass by the whole time you're playing, and you're like, oh, there's a chest that's covered in red goo, and then you figure out how to open up the chest with red goo on them, and now like there's all these places I've explored that have all these chests with red goo on them, and I'm like, I don't remember where any of that crap was. And so I guess that kind of annoys me, I think. And the other thing that bugs me a little bit about this game is that there are a lot of people who really dig it when the game allows you to kind of go into like, let me try and take on dudes that are like a lot tougher than me. Oh, cool. These guys are like super hard or whatever. Or, maybe I'm meant to do this later, but I can go ahead and do it now. It's just going to be harder. And I don't know. I've always it's funny, the Oblivion system, when it first
Yeah.
came out, everyone hated it, and I feel like I was one of the few people who actually like loved it, like the way that, and there were definitely some problems with it. And
Yeah, I liked it in theory, but it was way too breakable.
what I mean by that, just for people who, because I'm kind of talking weird gaming meta terms, but the Oblivion system was that, enemies that spawned in certain areas would be based on your level. And once you leveled up, then tougher enemies would start spawning in those levels.
Right.
Or those parts of the game. And God of War has sort of a system where it's kind of static. So you can run into places that are kind of way above your level, which is fine with me, but I always get locked into these zones. So like there'll be these rifts that you can pull enemies out of, and I'll pull an enemy out of the rift that's like 3 levels higher than me, and he's like two-shotting me, and I can't leave the arena. And I think that's lame. I think it's I'd really rather be like, oh, whoops, and then be able to like escape or
Peace out.
something, like just choose whether I want to take the challenge rather than like just getting my face beat in and then my little kid's like, no, Dad.
Yeah, and
I mean,
and
God of
Nate
War
and I
doesn't
have
really
bright-
let you do that either. Like when the guy's way higher than you, like you pretty much aren't going to beat him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Nate and I have
stomped
griped about this at length, but there's actually an artificial like scaling to it where I think the cutoff is 3, but there's a certain number of levels that if they're higher than you, they basically become impossible to kill. So it's not even a situation of like, oh, if you're a bad enough dude, you can go beat the higher level stuff with your skills. It's like, no, if something's 3 levels or higher above you, you just can't really kill them. Like there's like a binary switch that's flipped where like you can't block them anymore. They one shot you. Your damage is reduced like to almost nothing. Like there's basically this flip that's switched that you just can't fight.
Yeah, I thought it was just me but
No, it's not just you. Yeah, I think the intention is that you come back and fight them when you've gotten more gear. I think it's similar to like the treasure chests covered in the goop that like, oh,
right.
It's not meant to take this on right now.
So God of War is clearly signaling to you that it does not want you to fight these enemies.
But then it's like you have to remember where all this crap is, man. Like where was the dude who I pulled out of the rift to carve my face off, or whatever. But I mean, most of the time I don't run into stuff like that. But there've been a couple of times where I'm like, oh, okay, well, this guy. Another tiny gripe I have, and the only reason I'm, I guess, pointing these things out is because the rest of the thing is so solid. I think, the axe feels great. Of course, there's been internet videos about how good the axe feels. And, I enjoy kind of the banter between the son. I think a lot of the characters are so funny. Like the dude Brock or whatever, like there's some dwarf who's like blue.
And Brock and his brother Sindri.
Yeah, and Brock is just like Sindri's okay. He's a little bit like neurotic or something, but Brock is great because he's always just like talking about your kid and just like he's like, "Where's your little squirt?" Or whatever. He's just like,
oh yeah, that would be a kind term.
Yeah,
from Brock.
Yeah. So I think he's freaking. He's pretty funny. I'm a big fan of Brock, but I think the skill tree is also a little bit boring. Like, I don't know. Like when I'm looking at like the different things I can do, either in shield and fist form or with my axe, either attacking with my axe or throwing my axe. Like, I don't know. I thought for a while that I'd be able to get into the rhythm of doing that sort of, there's sort of a combo you can do where if you pull the axe back at the right time, throw apparently does like extra damage or explodes on impact or something. And after whatever I put in the game, like 10 or 11 hours, I've still never really got the hang of that. And so I think I like a lot of the special skills you get. So you've got like a heavy runic attack and a light runic attack, and then your kid has got a special attack himself. That's probably been my favorite part of the combat, is just kind of integrating those into what I'm doing. But overall, I don't know. The skill trees haven't really excited me, but that's not too big of a thing. And I think the only other weird thing about God of War to me is that and you guys probably know this from last time we talked about God of War, but I've played 1, 2, 3 Ascension and both the PSP titles. So I'm used to my Kratos being not only strong but also fast. And in this game, he's just strong. And so there's a little bit of weird dissonance for me because, like, I can't, like, a lot of times you're kind of required, at least if you want to start popping the enemies, to, use your boy to kind of shoot them with an arrow and kind of stun them for a second. And then you can kind of hit them, because otherwise they're just hopping around everywhere. And so it's weird because I'm not used to my Kratos being so slow.
Right.
and that's and so it's a weird little bit of as the game critics would call it, maybe like ludonarrative dissonance, where
Oh man, look at you busting that out.
Where I feel like my character is faster than he is based on just my history with him.
Right.
But I've gotten used to this incarnation of him.
This is old man Kratos.
Yeah, old man Kratos. So, although he can still be really fast when he wants to be.
When he wants to be, yeah.
In cutscenes or when you activate Spartan Rage. But the other times, he's just sort of like a little chuggy.
Yeah. Yeah, that was also a thing for me. You don't dodge as quickly and that kind of stuff. And there were some combat situations where I was like, man, I just want that to be a little quicker.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and it seems like, I guess, right now, the slow, methodical, purposeful, I dare say, Souls-like combat is all the rage. And I wonder if that's one of the reasons that this one did catch on for a lot of people. And not to say that it's Souls-like, because who am I to say that? But it is a lot slower and more methodical.
Well, and they do a lot of different things with that combat. So you definitely have like weaker enemies that you can just kind of go beat them up on. But they also have some of the more challenging boss fights, and then they have these combat challenges, which kind of encourage you to play specific ways.
Those were kind of interesting up in the fireplace.
Muspelheim.
Yeah, I actually really liked that mixture of like some of the side boss fights and the use like combat challenge, which is like use your knockback instead of your killing or whatever.
And it's not that I needed more of Kratos. Like I said, I've had like 6 games of like standard slashy Blades of Chaos Kratos, so it's not like I necessarily needed that.
Yeah, like I might like the old style better as well, but I'm glad they changed it up because, like you said, I don't need more of that.
Right. So yeah, but I'm having a fun time with that. I don't know how far I am through it. I don't know if maybe you guys would know, but
if I knew,
sounds like probably.
Based on what you said, I feel like you're pretty far. If I interpreted what you said correctly,
I just got the we'll just say the old school. The old school jams.
At least halfway, but probably more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway,
I'm
that's
pretty sure.
But that's what I've been playing, guys.
Cool.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, I'm having fun.
Yeah.
Awesome game.
I've bounced off God of War. I keep meaning to get back around to it, but just haven't done it. So I think we were 4 hours in whenever we stopped, so
Gotcha.
barely scratched the surface. All right. Well, we're getting close to wrapping up the episode. I think for the next couple of weeks, I'm probably going to put some more time into that No Man's Sky. Probably, like I said, I feel like I've got maybe another 20 hours left to play in that. So I'll do some of that. And I'm actually not traveling for once in my life, so I'm going to see if I can't dust off the PS4 and get back to some stuff that I was thinking about getting into there. Ryan, what are you playing for the next couple of weeks?
I'll probably be working on Avernum and Monster Hunter World, but I also will probably, in the meantime, pick something else up. I was going to play some 2018 games, but I realized that the ones I want to play I either don't own or haven't come out yet. So if I was picking today, I will probably pick up either Orwell or Danganronpa.
Okay.
Trigger Happy Havoc next.
Okay.
fire them truth bullets.
Yep. You gotta shoot them. Flex, what are you planning on playing for the next couple weeks?
Guacamelee 2 is the main thing. I might try and squeeze in another backlog game or two as well, because I was actually looking at this yesterday. I am pretty much caught up on the 2018 games I want to play. Okay. More stuff. September stuff starts coming out again. So basically these next couple weeks, Guacamelee, maybe some Monster Hunter, maybe some Dead Cells, maybe some backlog stuff. We'll see.
All right. Nate, what you got?
Pretty much the same boat. I've been working through some backlog stuff and Dead Cells, so I'll finish SteamWorld Heist. I've played 2 episodes of Stories Untold, which I think there's a couple more of that to do, so I'll do that. And then see what the September games are looking like.
Okay, that sounds good. Will, what about you?
Gonna finish God of War.
All right.
Probably gonna play some more Monster Hunter World, and I've been working on still working on this game with my friend Luke called Gunheart. Okay. But it's pretty crappy, so I'm probably not going to talk about it on the podcast, but hopefully we'll finish that soon.
All right, sounds good. All right, well that's gonna wrap it up for us here. We have been adults talking about cool stuff. This is episode 44. We will be back in your feeds in 2 weeks with episode number 45, where we continue to talk about cool things. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you then.